Welcome to the Cerius Leadership Podcast, where we bring you tools and insights to lead your business with confidence. Today, we're continuing our Strategic Advisor series and diving into a topic every business owner faces: taxes. But in a way that might surprise you. I get to do tax talk today with Richard Huffman, CPA and business tax strategist. He really has a true passion for tax strategy and making it a proactive part of our business plan. From the most common tax pitfalls and missed opportunities, this episode will help us better understand really that crucial partnership with a financial expert. So, whether you dread tax season or embrace it, this conversation will show you how the right strategy can protect your business and fuel its growth. Richard, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Kristen. Yeah, glad to be here and talk to you and your audience. So thanks so much for having me. Yeah.
I'm excited because we've known each other for a while. And usually, when you're introduced to a group of people, the introduction goes something like, "This is Richard Huffman, who stays up all night reading the new tax code the day it comes out." I'm curious, where did that reputation come from?
Yeah, great question, Kristen. I just get so passionate, and excited about, helping our clients to maximize the cash that they bring back in their pockets, and a lot of that has to do with minimizing the taxes. And when a new law comes out, then my brain just starts spinning and I just can't stop it because I'm thinking of all the different angles and different ways to position our clients so they could maximize the benefits of these new laws. Yeah, for instance, back in 2017, the new tax act came out and there was so many little nuggets that, you could really dive into to help save on taxes, but you had to structure and understand it very well to benefit, from those nuggets.
That's a good point. So when you look at, there's programs that you type in, you fill in all of the blanks, and it knows every new tax code. But it's very different than having, especially as AI is taking over so many things, to you knowing all of those hidden gems and those things to be proactive about it, to really help them strategize. Because
Yeah.
once you're typing it in, it feels like the bus has left the station and you're not on it.
Yeah, as much as AI is powerful and there's so much help there on the internet, I think the unique proposition that us and other CPAs bring is just really understanding our clients and their business and what's going on. And oftentimes we might understand that better than our clients themselves. For instance, I was meeting with a client the other day and talking about, well, you're really not structured properly for estate planning and asset protection. And the client just is not aware of that because they're just so focused on being successful in their business.
Which thankfully, the more successful they are, the more they need that strategic advice and how to structure everything from a tax advantage. So you just mentioned something, some of those vehicles like estate planning, that's not necessarily just focused on the business taxes. You're looking at their entire asset management system.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of the businesses that we work with, it's, they struggled and they put a lot of blood and sweat into this business and nurtured it along. And finally, they're successful and now they have a tax problem. And then they come to us and then we talk to them and say, well, yeah, you have a tax problem, but you also need to think about asset diversification, estate planning, and asset protection, so those all kind of come together so that they could protect what they have and also, protect their next generation in the wealth accumulation.
That's a good point, because we're seeing that. And we're seeing that right now with I think we're going through the largest transfer of wealth in our history and all of the changes that are coming with that. So when you're sitting down and you're doing planning, and for anyone of us that own a business, how often should we be meeting with our CPA to be proactive and create comprehensive strategies around not just our business, but our lives?
Yeah, I mean, typically you should be checking with your CPA, I would say, depending on, um, the complexity of what's going on and how many significant events you have. But on a typical basis, we like to check in with our clients, either monthly or quarterly. And, we have a lot of conversations just like, well, I'm considering buying a building, how should I structure it? How do I set it up? What do you think? To, well, thinking about selling the business and retiring. Now we need to structure this out and plan it out. And, we want to talk about that, at least a few years ahead of time, so we could, set up the plan. So it just depends on the complexity and what they have going on.
You mentioned something. So you're planning years ahead if someone is looking to exit their business, either acquire or sell their company or any part of it. You're looking years ahead to be able to structure that in the optimum way for them.
Yeah, absolutely, because they really need to focus in on, okay, what is going to optimize their value? And that is not something that you could just do overnight. You need a few years to really focus on optimizing, the business and the value that represents. You might need some, reviewed or audited financial statements, and that takes time to get the company books in order to go through that process. But there's a lot of different things that business owner needs to consider to maximize their value. So the businesses are most successful, they give it some time ahead to figure it out. And then you need to figure out who's the best buyer, because there's a lot of different buyers to consider. It could be anywhere from, a third party to even an internal buyer where we have employee stock option plans. So that's another avenue. So giving it time to think that over and what makes most sense for the company and the business and their next layer of leadership to help continue the growth of that company and optimize value. Yeah.
I can imagine you're very integrated into those conversations because I've heard some do not have a CPA who's involved in like that. And I've heard some horror stories of how the deal was structured. It was very tax advantageous to the acquirer and not to the business owner selling the company, because how that is structured and in what forms can really impact who's got the tax liability and how that's shared.
Yeah, absolutely. There's tremendous tax differences based on how you structure a sell, whether you're selling the stock or the assets, there's huge differences there. So, we have a lot of experience in that area of sitting down with business owners and really understanding their business and how to structure it properly to maximize sales. And yeah, we've made or broken deals because of
Oh,
tax
wow.
structuring. We told them this deal is not going to work because you're giving away 60 cents to the government, and then the buyer just for example, the buyer came in, wanted to buy the assets, and it just was not going to work in their favor. So they had to walk away from that deal. Unfortunately, later on, another buyer came to the table and presented a better deal, and they were able to keep more of that money and were more successful. But just understanding, identifying, going over that with the business owner is very important. So yeah, they definitely should talk to their CPA, even if they don't think they want to sell now. Still talk about what it might look like, because we've had business owners say, I don't want to sell, and then the next couple of months later they say, well, somebody gave me a deal too good to be true and I'm selling. So it's always good to plan and be positioned even if you don't think you want to sell right now.
One of the questions that comes up, because a lot of these events that you're talking about, the business owner is very integrated into. More and more, we're seeing business owners kind of relinquish the reins of that tax partnership, and they've got a fractional CFO, or they've got a full-time controller, or even their bookkeeper. How often, even though you relinquish that, what should that business owner still be involved in, and how often touching base, versus, hey, I've got someone to handle that. Now I don't have to go through another tax conversation. As much as I love Richard Huffman or my CPA, I don't have to go through another tax conversation again.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I don't think they'll ever get out of the tax conversation, because even if they sell that business, they got to invest it. But yeah, I mean, that's a good question. Building up a leadership team is very important if you're going to have a business that could operate without you. So, I mean, that's always the goal. But of course, you still need to be involved and oversee what's going on. And that's why we encourage business owners to be, involved in the finances, be involved in the decision making. They need to be the visionary now of the company and determine what path they want that company to go. Do they need to pivot? Do they need to change? Are they still growing? Are they just looking to attract a buyer, and are they positioned properly? So those are all critical components that only the business owner is going to be, primarily motivated to accomplish, since, the team is going to be focused on just running the business.
You've mentioned that a couple times, the some of those triggers that happen. What are, especially for business, I am busy running my business. And as I'm making those decisions or we're going into strategic planning, look at that. I'm not thinking, how do I mitigate my taxes? It's just not the first thing that's coming to mind. You mentioned some triggers earlier, like buying a building. What are some of the most common things that the phone rings, you pick it up, they're saying, Richard, I got to check this with you. What do you think? Or those things that I may not be thinking, I need to talk to my CPA first.
Yeah, I mean, very good question. A lot of calls that we get are, I'm looking to expand, diversify. I'm looking to move into another state. I'm looking to
Ah,
purchase some real estate. How do I do it tax efficiently? And also, thinking about the other aspects of it. We're not attorneys, but, we talk about you got to select an entity, and here's the most tax efficient way to set up that entity. And usually that works well for legal purposes too, but talk to your attorney. So we kind of have a little bit of overlap there, but usually it's some triggering event, something going on, and about growth, expansion, purchasing assets, diversifying. I want to take money out of the company. Is this going to trigger gain? Yeah, it could. So it's always good to talk to your CPA first about any significant transactions you might be considering, for yourself or the business. Yeah, or I want to move out of state. That's been common. There's a lot of
I would
discussions
see that.
about moving out of California and
Yeah.
saving some taxes. And, that's something you need to talk to your CPA about, because, there's a right way to do it and there's a wrong way to do it. Yeah. So, mhm.
I love it. You mentioned that there might be some overlap with an attorney. Uh, what other, because we tend to be the hub and spoke, me as the business owner, I'm going to talk to my attorney and then I'm going to go talk to my CPA and then I'm going to go talk to my financial advisor. That just doesn't, I'm all about efficiency, Richard. That does not seem like a very efficient way to do it versus if I have you talking to each other with my best interest in mind and sharing information, how often are you overlapping with other strategic advisors?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. And, the attorneys, business attorneys were overlapping a lot because, they want to set up a new entity. And, it used to be the attorneys would drive most of that decision making, but after the 2017 Tax Act, the pass-through deduction,
Mhm.
there's a lot of differences there in tax wise and how you set up an entity, and now you have qualified small business stock with zero tax on gains. If you're in a C corp entity, you have pass-through deductions. So I know us CPAs have kind of taken the reins on what deciding, for the most part, what type of entity to structure, whether it's a C corp, S corp, or LLC or LP, but we like to have that discussion with the attorney, because we are not, most CPAs out there, we do not practice law, and we do not know what the intricacies about protecting these businesses from legal threats. So we design what's most tax efficient and what we think will work from all the other clients that worked on, and then talk to the attorney about how if there's anything we're missing. Yeah.
So is that something that that most CPAs would be comfortable with, business owners saying, look, I've taken a lot of notes and that's great. Can you just go talk to my attorney? Can you just talk to my financial advisor and then you guys come back and make recommendations to me?
Yeah, absolutely. I always prefer introduce me your attorney, let's talk together about it. And I think that, that goes a lot farther than just the client trying to relay the message, and then we're working together on a team approach. And then I make sure there isn't anything I've missed. And then we built rapport with the attorney. So, hey, if there's anything comes up in the future, we could huddle together, Yeah, this has happened a lot with me recently for estate planning, because, as much as we do some estate planning internally, oftentimes we're working with the outside estate planning attorney. So we're having repeat meetings with clients and their estate planning attorney. So they could structure the legal documents and we could talk together on the strategy. And then, we know the client and the numbers, and we could, pull together the tax savings and help, determine how the numbers will look like afterwards. So there's tremendous value of bringing everybody together, the whole team, yeah, to accomplish, the goals of the client. Yeah.
And that's more and more we've been having those conversations as those goals of the client, it's not just their business, it's their personal life. And those two are so intermixed, and we've tried to keep them separate for so long. And I think that the more we're aligning those professional goals with the personal goals and values, do I need this for longevity? Am I looking to pass it on to my children? Am I looking to pass it on to my employees? Or I'm ramping this up to sell in 2 years. I can imagine the strategies in the business are different. I can't imagine what that strategy looks like from a tax perspective and preparing for that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's why we talk to clients saying, well, how risky is your business? Should you be diversifying now? Should you be buying some real estate, investing some money in other types of vehicles, and then what is your long-term goal? Do you just going to have enough for retirement, or do you want to pass some assets on to the next generation? How are we going to protect those assets? So, there's a lot more involved than just looking at the business. It's looking at the business owner and making sure that he's protected, making sure that he's not overpaying in taxes, but also that we're protecting his long-term interests, so he could build this up, so he could retire, so he could pass on assets to the next generation. And then there's also a lot of tax vehicles for charity too. So if they're charitable inclined, then we talk about what might be the best vehicle to save them taxes now. So a lot of clients say, well, I'll just leave a lot of my assets to charity when I pass away. Well, if you think about doing it now, then you could save on income taxes as well, not just estate taxes. So, we have those discussions, with these business owners so they could take advantage of tax mitigation now instead of later.
I'm hearing that more and more, the strategies for start it now versus holding off until through, because we always say, well, I'll do that at some point. Well, in 5 years. Well, I'm going to let the next generation worry about that. And we've had a tendency to kick the can. It's always 5 years out versus putting everything in place or planning for it now. Everyone seems to be a bit more proactive to doing that. Have you seen a shift?
Well, it depends on where the business owner is with the life cycle of the business. So, I mean, in the beginning, they're doing everything themselves. They're really busy making sure that the, business is operating properly, and then I think once they reach a certain level of success, then they realize, hey, I need to bring in more people. Like we were talking about earlier, bringing in more people to manage the business. And then once they're able to establish these others to manage the business, then they could start thinking about, excuse me, the next level of future planning that they need to accomplish. And then usually that's when, clients, a real lot more receptive to what we're saying is, you really need to think about the long term and all these other things you need to put into place. But, I understand their perspective when they're so busy and just trying to make it day to day. It's hard for them to allocate time for a long term goal, when they're just trying to survive. But usually that's why we keep telling them, you got to build the team. You're successful enough so you could, focus on the future planning and what's really critical for the long term.
And it sounds like as some of those suggestions that you're saying is don't keep all the wealth inside the business. Let's find other ways to mitigate your risk, all the eggs in one basket, and set up some other structures. And that frees us up as owners to think, okay, do I want to go buy a commercial building? Do I want to go buy residential real estate and build a property management company? Do I want to diversify in other ways? Or do I want to go buy a farm and have it for charity? It sounds like there's so many options that once our mind gets freed up over here, we can think about those things that you're talking about, because it doesn't come easy for some of us.
Yeah, absolutely. They're so focused on the business and nurturing and developing it, but we got to look at, how much do you really need to reinvest in the business and how risky
Is that
is this business, so if they have high risk, then yeah, they absolutely should be diversified. That's why I say, you're paying a certain amount of rent to a third party. Why don't you pay rent to yourself? So that's usually the next step is buy a building to operate the business out of, And, there's some great SBA loans that you could take advantage of. So it's not a big cash outlay. And then, real estate has some great tax benefits as well. So then they purchase that real estate. Now they've diversified a bit from the business into some real estate, so, but, it just depends on the client and where they're at in the business. Some clients, they just need every dollar to be reinvested
Mhm.
back into that business to keep growing it. And that's why we really need to understand their business as CPAs and understand, what's important to them and where they're at with their life cycle of their business.
You just mentioned we really got to understand the business. As you're first getting to know the business and you're asking questions, what are some of those kind of pitfalls that you stumble upon or missed opportunities that are the most common, especially when we go from all we're doing, just we call it grinding, just grinding through our business. And now we finally have some profit. We finally are getting to the point where that tax plan, it does matter, but we didn't know to structure it certain ways, or we're completely missing the boat on some opportunities. What might some of those be that you say, yep, I've seen this story before. We're going to do X, Y, Z now because it's so common.
Yeah, and usually when a client comes over, then we're looking at their cash flow because cash is king, and everybody's heard of the concept growing broke, and it's a reality. If you're not careful and how you're growing, you could grow broke and not have cash to sustain that growth and just sustain your operations. So usually I'm laser focused if they're in a high growth phase is how are you managing your cash, because that is critical. Is it getting tied up in your receivables? Is it getting tied up in unproductive assets? How are you managing that cash? So I like to take a look at that as well. And also explaining, sometimes you don't actually have the cash, but you still owe the tax on that income,
Yeah, we
So,
love those
yeah, I
situations,
know
but
it's it's very
what is that?
unfortunate. So it's planning ahead for that. So it's not a surprise because we don't like our clients to be surprised. And then, sometimes they're in the wrong entity, and sometimes we have flexibility there. If they're in a C corporation, but they should be an S corporation, we can elect to change them from C to S if it makes sense. But we have to look at their circumstances and see, are we going to trigger some taxes by doing the conversion or not, or is it best for long term? So there's a lot of different things to consider, but that's why these clients come to a CPA who works on other businesses like we do, because they know that, hey, we have a wealth of knowledge working on all these larger companies to help them through the growing pains. So, but I think what some business owners might not lose sight on is, hey, their CPA has a vast knowledge of other companies going through the same thing that they do, and they really need to tap into that knowledge and get advice to help them.
As I can imagine that you're seeing the financials, you're seeing the business strategies, you're seeing that across probably hundreds of companies. So you've seen what does work, what doesn't work. You've seen the various industries, which reminds me, how relevant is industry experience in what you do, given the depth of knowledge that you learn about your clients?
Yeah, I mean, industry experience is important, but I think what's most important is what is the business is going through. They're going through high growth. Is it a service business or manufacturing business? There's nuances to that, but very specific industry is not as important, I believe, unless they need our help in, you know, negotiating contracts or very detailed work, which usually is not the
Mhm.
case because they're experts in that area. But we work with a vast array of different industries, and it's usually just focused on you're a private business owner and you're going through a growth cycle or you're going through a maturity phase. How can we be helping you at this phase and where you're at?
Do you have family trust? Do you have three other businesses? Do you have one business with this individual and one business with your family? We see a lot of interesting structures, right? When we're putting executives into a business, the periphery and what's going on around it, or are they about to go into a transaction, having manufacturing experience, but never having gone through due diligence? Those are two very different elements
Absolutely.
of
Yeah,
skills and
valuing
experience.
inventory is, yeah, valuing inventory, they might think it's worth one thing where it's not that's not reality, based off, what industry then the threats to growth, so, that's also important that, they have a CPA who understands them and what they're going through in their business. So that's why we take the time to really understand these businesses really well and the threats that they're facing. So, the Amazon effect, we had a lot of clients struggling with the Amazon effect, and they still are. So, just being real with, Amazon's not going away anywhere soon. They've taken a lot of the market share, what some of these smaller manufacturers are trying to accomplish. And how do you pivot? How do you stay relevant? How do you stay in business? That's, we work with some clients who that's a reality, and it's not easy, but they have to keep reinventing themselves every day. And we need to be they need to tap in the CPA to be part of that to help them.
You mentioned threats to growth. You're sitting down with them and going through, and really good CPAs are going through, what are the potential threats? How are we going to mitigate that? And I mentioned not just from a tax perspective, but you've seen the full cycle of it to say, let me bring in these other two experts.
Yeah, absolutely. For example, I had a client who was, really manufacturing here in the US, and their competition was, other businesses that were manufacturing in China, and prices were just a lot less. So, we were able to bring in a business consultant to really sit down and dial in on, okay, this product line is not profitable. You need to let it go. Now, however, this other product line, you should build off of it, and you could, differentiate yourself, from the China products, and really build this one up and have some higher profit margins.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's critical, is building the team. And that's, part of what we do is identifying, what's the needs for other advisors to come in, because, we are primarily tax professionals, and
Mm-hmm.
we don't try to, fill the shoes of other professionals. And that's why, being part of a networking group, and being able to bring in other professionals at the right time is just so great for our clients.
I love the point that you've made as we partner with I call it strategic advisor teams, whether it's your attorney, your banker, your CPA, is being able to go to them for questions or business situations that might not be a specific tax situation. But I think you've seen hundreds of situations and hundreds of companies to be able to say, kind of air traffic controller, and be able to say, correct, that's not a tax situation, but I know what situation that is, and I know exactly who to call.
Absolutely. And that's what, our clients know us as, is, yeah, they're great at taxes, but they're also my trusted advisor.
Mhm.
And I could bring a question to them, and either they're going to know the answer, or they're going to find me somebody else who does know the answer. So that's always our goal. And, we don't want to provide the wrong answer. So if it's something specialized, I'm the first to admit it. And I hope,
Mhm.
most CPAs are as well, that, hey, let's get you the right person to help you with what you need.
Fantastic. And from a global perspective and being a tax strategy expert, one or two key pieces of advice that you would give business owners to really help them level up their tax planning, or level up that partnership with their CPA?
Yeah, and I think what's most critical is, with a lot of these business owners, like I said, they're so busy just keeping the doors open, running the business. And really, if they need to spend the time to step back and think about the long-term strategy, and they need to have an advisory team helping them with that. They need to, as a smaller business, maybe it's just the CPA, but maybe as they start to grow, they add more advisors to that team. That really is going to help them to grow that business properly, to pivot and change when they need to, instead of when it's
Yeah.
too late, and to exit out at the optimal time. And they, of course, they're so focused on the business, they're not going to see, hey, I should have turned left there and I missed that opportunity. But other advisors will be able to guide them and help them to make those right decisions. So I believe that's just so important, to have the advisory team.
And that's just multiplying. Each of you has 50 to 100, or has seen 100 different situations across industries. You multiply that. It's been a while since I've done my permutation math, but you multiply that out. It's almost like you can't go wrong with getting the right advice and the right path forward based on what each of you has seen across the client base, and you've seen all the different scenarios play out. I think that's terrific advice. Thank you, Richard, and thank you so much for sharing. You've had some interesting situations, I imagine, through your career, and being able to lay it out so succinctly. To It really depends on where they're at in their life, where they're at in their business cycle, and being able to not just support them for where they're at right now, but support them where they want to be 2 years from now, 3 years from now, or 20 years from now. We can't have a crystal ball, but to turn that unexpected surprises into expected, predictable, we know what's going to happen because we designed it that way. I can see how integral you are to that.
Yes, yeah, we love to have a plan in place and understanding that it's, we're not making concrete here. It's a plan that's going to adjust and change as things move on. That's why it's always important to have the plan and then to keep meeting and talking about, what adaptations, what changes do we need, to serve the
Yeah.
goals. Yeah.
Iterate, iterate. Well,
Yeah.
Richard, thank you for joining me and sharing your expertise on serious leadership.
Thank you so much.